All right. And I am going to get started here. So I'm just going to get into this and start. I'm going to start UV mapping some stuff. And I'll kind of explain a few things as I go, especially when there's things that are specifically challenges to Maya or challenging objects. Yeah, I'm just going to dive in and start UV mapping this stuff and hopefully you can learn some things from this. So this one I've done before, but I'll do it again. Oh, and I have to clean up a little bit. Somebody found some end guns. I should have been more careful. Should have checked myself, but I didn't. So there we go. Let's see, that's good to go. This doesn't need to exist. So I gotta fix these. Right here. Good to go. And Gon's bad. That's correct. Yeah, thanks for joining me. So yep, one gun fixed, or actually two. But yep, now I'm just gonna place these back where they were, just because it just looks so much cooler that way. And then I'm gonna get to UV mapping. Good enough. All right, let's dive into this. So again, strategically speaking, I'm just gonna look for strategic shell choices, and this one makes sense to me. On Bart, nice. That's gonna eat up your data. Hope you got unlimited data. All right, let's see. Mapping, planar map. Z. Shell over. I'm gonna go ahead and cut a seam. Grab the shell in UV mode. So again, I'm always all about the the marking menus. So I don't really get into that that other toolbar that a lot of people use. What is it? Got hidden. Where did it go? Nope. I wonder if it's behind something. Nope. Interesting. Oh yeah, UV toolkit right here. Yeah, so this little UV toolkit is the new stuff. I'll leave it open just in case. I do occasionally use some things out of it, but unlimited, nice. All right, so again, I've got my shell. I'm in UV mode. I'm going to shift right click, unfold, unfold options, and then I'm going to switch to legacy. And none is probably going to work just fine here. Yeah, none seem to work just fine. Then I'll turn on my shaded UVs so I can see the shells better. And of course, always test it. Make sure that you've got nice clean squares. Let me isolate selected on this as well, just to make it easier to see. But there we go, nice clean distortion all the way around. And then now all I gotta do is the roof. I gotta do the roof because that still has plenty of distortion on it. That's still all messed up. So let's dive into that. And for what I'm going to do here, just to make my life easier, I'm pretty sure I want this entire thing to be one shell. So I'm just going to project on the entire thing. And the easiest way to do that, because I unwrapped this shell already, turn off my checkers for a minute. Because I unwrapped this shell already, that means that everything else in the entire model is all right here. So I can literally just go into face mode and select everything right here, and I get the entire roof all at once. Just saves me some steps. Makes the selection process easier. So then I'm going to go to mapping, shift right click mapping planar Y, and then and the reason I chose Y, of course, is because most of the roof is facing the Y axis, which is of course up and down. So now I've got the shell sort of projected. And again, in other software, you'd be able to skip this step. You don't really have to do the projection because you can just cut seams and then it'll unfold stuff. But that's because those other programs are better at UV mapping than Maya is. Yeah, I'm gonna put this on YouTube. I just figured out I might as well just live stream it while I do it because it's gonna take a while. I'm gonna just go through every object that I've got so far and just unwrap all of them. That way there's basically a good thorough process shown. Figure that would be beneficial for everyone. So yeah, I'm just gonna live stream it right now, and then I'll put it on YouTube when it's done. So feel free to ask questions. If you ask questions, that'll probably make the video better. So I would encourage you to do that so that everyone can benefit. Okay, cool. So I am going to now have to cut some seams. I've got the shell created now, but I already know that there's no way I'm going to be able to unfold this like it is because there's all these corners, and when UVs turn corners like this, 90 degrees this way, 90 degrees this way, all these sharp corners here, I can just glance at those and know that there's going to be an issue. I need to cut seams there, otherwise it won't unfold. So I'll just do that, and I'll turn off my shaded UVs for a minute because it makes it easier to make selections, so I can see my selections better. And what I want is this edge, these corners all the way around, and then I want these edges down here as well. So an easy way to do that is I can just left click to select one, but then Control Shift double click the next edge. So again, if I click and then Control Shift double click, and then it's selecting the face path. Again, it's a face path selection is what that's called, and that just selects all the way around exactly those faces or edges, sorry, that I wanted. And I could do that again if I hold Control Shift click this to add to this selection, and then Control Shift double click that one. Again, it goes all the way around and gets every single edge that I want without having to go around and select every single one manually, which is a huge time saver. All those little selection tricks like that really speed up your process if you get into that. So now that I've got those selections, I need to go back to the UV editor and then shift right click cut. And this is something that a lot of beginners like forget, is that if I shift right click over here, it gives me different options than if I shift right click over here in the UV editor. If you're in the UV editor, it's going to give you UV editing options. If you're over here, it's going to give you like modeling options. So just double check that make sure you're pointed at the UV editor with your cursor when you do the shift right clicking. Now I've cut the seams. And now if I do an unfold, go to the shell, UV mode, like a marquee, select the shell, and then now I'll go back to my unfold options and give it a shot. And of course, test the distortion. And it's pretty clean. This looks pretty good. Nice clean checkers all the way around. Got a few seams here. I needed these seams though. If you do an unfold, if you see the faces or the edges spread apart from each other, then you know that this seam was necessary. Maya needed to spread this apart, and in order to spread it apart, you have to cut that seam. Otherwise there's going to be distortion there. So we've got that done now. This whole thing is unfolded. There's no distortion now. All that's left is basically to lay it into the 0 to 1 space. And again, there's options here, like talking about laying it out. It has to fit in the 0 to 1 space, right? It has to fit in here. And so all of this needs to fit in there. Of course, it's going to need to be scaled down, but also let's just do it first. Let's just do the layout first. So if we go to UV mode, grab all the UVs, shift right click, layout options. Again, I've switched to legacy, and I've switched to prescale world, and I'm gonna hit apply. And what that's gonna do, let me just reset this. Reset settings. Legacy, prescale world. There we go. I think I accidentally had to somehow check the allow overlapping. Yeah. Anyways, so this is what you should get, and what you've got here now is these shells are now perfectly matched in scale, which means that there won't be any change in resolution based on the which face is which and all that. So that's what you want. And again, that's the biggest reason that I use that layout option. Is it's not really for the layout. Yes, it did put things in the 0 to 1 space for me, but that's not really why I do it. I do it mostly to make sure my scale is matching across the UVs. So, and now it is. However, if you look at this, if this is like a full-size house model, we're talking like, you're looking up at it, then like if a character's this big, or this big, that's kind of low res. That's going to be pretty low res. I mean, depending on what my file size is, of course, for my texture, but I'm going to need a really high res texture to be able to paint that all the way around. So generally speaking, you're probably going to want to use some UV tricks, like you're going to want to cut seams across these shells, and you're going to want to overlap a bunch of these shells. Now, if you overlap those shells, of course, don't forget, like if I took this whole larger shell, and let me just rotate it back to its proper alignment. There we go, transform. Oh, you know what? I can do this way. Rotate shell. Counterclockwise. Cool. All right. So again, if this is like wall, and I mean, if this is a full-size house and you're in a first-person game, those walls are going to be pretty low res unless you crank up the texture resolution of your texture. So yeah, that's a little crazy. So generally speaking, in a game engine, if this is a first-person shooter house, then you're gonna want to like use some tricks like cutting all these into overlapping pieces, where I would take this, overlap it, take this, overlap it, and take this and overlap it. And at that point now, anything I paint on one wall shows up on all the walls, but it also allows me to use a much higher resolution um, texture. So, and you can just look at it like if I put this into the 0 to 1 space, I can actually scale both of these way up and still fit them in. And that gives me a much higher resolution to work with for my texture. But again, that just also limits you in the sense that now you're stuck with whatever you paint on this wall has to go on all the walls. So that's the trade-off. And of course, as an artist, you want to be able to paint unique textures on each wall. So that's the kind of pros and cons balancing act scenario. But again, for beginners, I'd rather see you paint a higher res. It's not as efficient. It's not really great for game engines, but as a beginner, I'd rather see you paint a really high res, unique texture across the entire thing, because that it's good. It's good practice, and it's good. It's more fun. It'll be a nicer presentation. Plus, you guys don't know the tricks yet for optimizing. You guys don't know the tricks yet for using overlapping UVs, but then also detail textures, like basically secondary UVs and UV channels and stuff like that. So since you don't know those tricks, I don't want to even go there. Let's just keep the textures unique across each face, each shell. You can use a little bit of overlapping UVs here and there if it's not critical, like if it's just like a wall in the background, then yeah, it's a big giant wall, and it's just not very crucial that it looks amazing. You can also use tricks, and these are tricks you could use. You can also use tricks like using overlapping UVs on most of the wall, but then if you need spots where there's damage or like more unique texture, then make a separate model. Make a separate model that's, a damaged chunk of wall, and then texture that one separately, of course. So there's all kinds of tricks you can use if you want to be efficient and still make nice artwork. Okay, so this model's good to go for now. There's a lot of texture space here still that I can lay other objects into, so I'll get to that later. Well, let's just get everything unfolded first. Getting things unfolded is the main priority. Laying it out into the 0 to 1 space is the last step, anyways. So let's just go in order and just kind of rip through all these and unfold everything. Let's move on to the chimney here. So again, I'll just Control 1 to isolate it, just to get everything else out of the way. And let's just rip through this. So this, did I get rid of? Yeah, okay, good. I ripped off the bottom of it. Just double checking that I've optimized. But let's go into face mode, grab all of these faces. And again, strategically, why am I choosing this shell? I'm choosing this shell because I can already look at it and tell, okay, I have a plan for this shell that it's going to unfold fairly easily. And I can see that it's right where this changes directions, right here. Right where this changes directions, right here, that it's going to become a problem. Keeping that attached in the shell, when I do an unfold, that would cause problems right there, and I know I'd have to cut seams, so I may be able to reattach some of it later, but for now, just to make my life easier, I'm just going to grab all of these faces and then project on, let's see, the Z, so mapping Z, and I've got that shell now. But now, again, to unfold this, if I try to unfold it right now, it's going to implode. It's going to implode because there are no seams. I need a seam going down at least one of these edges, these edge loops. If I don't have a seam on one of those edge loops, it's just going to implode when I try to unfold it. Because, again, it's connected all the way around. And if I try to unfold it, it can't because it's stuck. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna cut down. I'm just gonna go with this edge loop. Actually, hold on. Let me double check. So in this case, there is a better choice. Where to cut the seams? Sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you just have to go with whatever seam works. Whatever seam is the seam you need to unfold it. But sometimes you have a choice. Like in this case, it could be I could use any one of these four edge loops going down the side of it. But if you have a choice, there are choices that are better. Like for instance, this choice right here, the back side of it makes the most sense to unfold, or I'm sorry, to cut a seam on, because it's going to be more hidden. It's like right up against the wall, so that would be more hidden in terms of less visible. Nobody's going to really see that seam. If you chose this seam, that seam goes right along the front side of it, which is the most visible side. So whenever you have a choice, if you have a choice, try to hide the seams. So, and I don't need this yet because, so I'm just going to hold the control key to deselect it. I just need to cut from here down to the bottom there. So again, shift right click, cut, and then I can go ahead and, yeah. So now I can go ahead and grab UV mode and shift right click, unfold options, bring that window back up, and I'll leave all the settings that I was using before, which is basically just legacy and then none. Hit apply. Okay, now here we're running into a problem. So look at the and I can just look at the shell and tell that this is a problem. So if I turn on the checkers, sure enough, there's distortion. It's pretty squishy. It's pretty squishy. We don't want squishy UVs. So why is that happening? It's happening because I'm just going to undo that, Control Z. It's happening because these edges here are causing problems because they're changing directions this way, and they're changing directions this way. So again, that's usually an indication that, yeah, I'm probably going to need seams there to keep that distortion from being introduced. So to handle that, to take care of it, again, I'll just cut here and here and here and here, and then I will cut, shift right click, cut UVs, and that is going to allow it to unfold and provide the gaps it needs. So now if I unfold, oh, I missed one. Okay. Oh, I know why. Because I didn't delete the back side of this. I could probably delete the back side of most of it. It depends though. Depends on if you want to use this as like if this was going to get destroyed somehow, then you might see that. So what I mean by that is, like, if the house got destroyed and left the chimney standing, then you would see the interior faces here. But it just depends on what you plan on doing with this. So I can pretty easily get rid of at least these two faces, because I plan to use these assets as modular pieces that you can sort of mix and match. This face does poke up above the roof a little bit, and it could poke up even more depending on if you wanted to, play around with it. Like if you put this asset somewhere else, it might poke up even more. But generally, using this asset, like in real life, I'm pretty sure I've never seen a chimney where the angled sides of it are sticking up above the plane of the roof. So I think you're pretty safe to delete those back faces here, the interior faces there. This one I would be a little bit more concerned about. I would just kind of leave that one alone just in case you poke the chimney up a little higher. Anyways, but now I should be able to get away with unfolding a little bit easier. This does need to this needs to have a seam there. Actually, I think let's double check. Nope, we're good. Okay, cool. So this is now good to go. And if I check my distortion, sure enough, it's pretty clean all the way around. So we're good on that now. And just now we just have to worry about this top bit. So let's just move on to that one. Turn off my checkers so I can see what I'm doing. turn off X-ray mode. And again, I'm toggling in and out of X-ray mode constantly. I set up my own custom hotkey for that. I believe I have that video visible right now on YouTube. So if you want to learn how to set up a custom hotkey for X-ray mode, I think that's visible. If it's not, I'll make it visible. I use that. I found that script, or found that ability a long time ago, and I use it constantly when I model. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out. All right, so okay, what are we gonna do with this? Well, we need to start by projecting a map and deciding what we want to do with it. I think what I'm gonna do is just grab everything there, and then Control Shift double click, and then I've got basically everything. Oh, except for this. Let's put that in there too. Okay, so now I will just mapping, Shift right click mapping, planar Y. Now I've got this shell now. And again, in theory, I shouldn't even have to project a planar map. I should be able to just cut seams and then unfold. Like most software could do that, but you know, whatever. If we got to use Maya, you got to use Maya. So just be ready to do that. Okay, so from here, again, there's a lot of changes of surface direction here. I can just look at this. I know that I'm gonna need to do some trickiness to get this to work. So easiest solution, I think, not necessarily the best, but the easiest is probably gonna be to get all of the corners and then deselect everything on this shell. So this is a good trick, selection trick. I can make some selections here, like edge loop selections, for instance. And then if I make an edge loop selection here, it's going to travel all the way down the model. But I don't want everything on the model. I just want whatever's on this shell. So what I did is I just made my selections with double clicks for edge loops over here on the model, and then went here to the UVs and held the Control key to deselect everything that's not on the shell that I'm working with. It just makes things so much easier if you can just to do little tricks like that. It takes way less time to make your selection. But now if I go Shift right click cut, and now if I do an unfold, so again UV mode, grab the shell, unfold. So now here's the thing. This is a pretty good unfold in the sense that it's gotten rid of the distortion. There's no distortion. We're good. It's clean. The only kind of real trick with this is it's really kind of an awkward shape. So this is where you have to make a decision, like, is this going to work for me? Like, is this a good shape? Is this going to be easy to fit into the 0 to 1 space? And in some cases, you can make some decisions like this. Like, so let's say, okay, I don't know if I like this unfold. I don't like this shell. What if I do this? What if I cut all these pieces off? So I'm going around cutting right where basically it changes into the interior of the chimney, like looking down the chimney basically. I can cut that off as its own shell. So if I cut those edges, this becomes its own shell. And then I can do something like this where I take these edges and move and so, move and so, move and so. And now this is its own shell. And this shell is a much easier shell to place in the 0 to 1 space, and you shouldn't underestimate that. That gets tricky. It gets tricky trying to place everything in the 0 to 1 space efficiently, where you basically the jigsaw puzzle. When you do the jigsaw puzzle, trying to get it all into that 0 to 1 space. If you have really awkward shell pieces, it's gonna make it a lot harder to do that effectively. And then you lose resolution and texture memory anyways. So sometimes cutting a few more seams or cutting the seams differently can make a big difference in making this easier. Another factor is this too. The interior of the chimney, it's probably not very critical that it looks really good. You could probably get away with shrinking it. And yes, it's going to change the resolution. It just depends on what you plan to do with it. For instance, if the interior of the chimney here, if you're just going to make it black, as if it's like, soot darkened kind of black or whatever, then at that point, it doesn't really matter if it's less resolution, because you won't be able to tell because it's just a solid color. It's just going to be black. It's only if you need to paint some nice details in there. Like if you had brick, if you were trying to put brick on the interior of this, then you would have to be careful that your resolution matches, because you'll see it really quickly. Like those fine grained patterns of brick, they'll start to become very visibly ugly if you lower the resolution on those. So. But yeah, just depends on what your strategy is, what you plan to do with this asset, and that could depend on what kind of game you're making. If you're making a top-down view game, like it's like a one of those 3/4 view top-down games, the interior of the chimney is going to be actually pretty visible because you're looking down at the roof. So that changes the priority of what's how the shells are going to be laid out. Then this becomes actually a lot more important. If this is a first-person game and your viewpoint's like this, and you can't climb up on top of the roof, then it doesn't even matter. Like if you can climb on top of the roof, maybe it does matter. But if you can't climb on top of the roof, this literally could be deleted. But you always have to be careful because you never know. If a level designer suddenly puts a spawn point on top of the roof, then you're like, oh crap, you were never meant to see into the chimney. Why'd you do that? So you just got to kind of plan for every eventuality if you're not the level designer. So okay, so let's keep moving. So this is all unfolded nicely now though, and I could I'll just lay it out for the hell of it. Grab it, lay it out, and I'll want to go back in and I'm gonna relay everything else out when I start combining things into texture sheets, anyways. But at least that now the shells aren't scattered everywhere. Now I could. These two are pretty much identical. Could be wrong actually. Oh no wait. They were instanced. There we go. So I had instanced these. I wasn't sure if I had tweaked these based on the house asset. But apparently not. These are instanced. So they are different scales, but they're scaled like this with the transform. Now, if you scale something with the transform, it actually doesn't cause a problem. It doesn't cause a problem with the instancing. But if you scale it with the UV, or I'm sorry, with the vertices, if I go into vertex mode, that's the difference between editing the shape node and editing the transform. Because the transform is this. It's these translate X, Y, and Z, scale X, Y, and Z. All of those are in the transform node. Those are two separate nodes. Those are two separate places to store the information about the model. And if you mess with the transform node, it doesn't affect the instancing. You can have unique, like I can make this, I can adjust it like this. Now I shouldn't though, because if I do this, it's going to stretch all the UVs. And in fact, let me show you. So watch the distortion on the UVs. If I do that, I'm stretching all my textures. So realistically, you shouldn't do that. You can scale things uniformly though. If you scale it uniformly, it's not going to cause distortion. So you could have a small chimney and a large chimney using the same UVs, and it would be fine. Assuming you don't get too crazy. If you scale it up huge, you can tell it's changing the size of the textures. So you're going to start to see some pixelation. So there's limits with what you can do even here. But if you scale uniformly, you can at least kind of nudge things a little bit one way or the other. You just have to be careful not to stretch the textures. Okay, so since those were instance, bam, those are both done. I only had to UV one, so that makes life a little easier. Let's see, what else can we do? The same thing is true here of these little suckers. Now, these little suckers can be a pain. A lot of ins and outs. There's a lot of squiggles. There's a lot of indentures and indentions, and then extrusions, and that just makes this. It just means I have to cut it up into smaller pieces to do this effectively. So let's just get it done. So what can I do? Well, strategically speaking, I already kind of know I'm going to make my life easier if I do certain things. Like if I grab the top faces here and the little change in direction here, if I grab those, it's going to give me better results than if I grab like this whole thing here. It's just going to be easier. So I'm going to grab these, and I'll turn off my shaded UV so you can see the selections better. But if I grab all of these going around this way, and I project a map. So in this case, X or Z works just fine, but Y would be the only surface direction that would be absolutely terrible. But if I do X or Z, it's good to go. Scoot this over, get it off my other shells. And then here, again, I'm just going to need... you know what? I just thought of something that can make my life a lot easier. I'm going to speed this up quite a bit. So I was ripping out shells bit by bit, and that gets me there. But you know what? I can skip a whole lot. I can skip a whole lot of projecting. If I just project the entire thing all at once. So if I just project the entire thing all at once, now I just have to cut a bunch of seams, and then the shells will create themselves, and I'll be good. So I'll double click this edge loop, cut. I'll double click this edge loop, cut. Let's see, where else do I think I'm gonna go here, cut, double click, cut. Now again, here it's gonna be, this is basically the inverse of this. So I'm just gonna do the same thing. Cut there. Yeah. No? Wait. Oh, I think I messed up. All right. Let's move it so. Yeah, I want to cut here. There we go. All right, so I'll do the same thing here. Cut there. Now, now that I've cut off the shells going this way, now I just need at least one seam going right down the middle, or not down the middle, but one seam going down the length. And it doesn't matter. Again, in this case, it doesn't really matter. It's a square thing. There's no real clear way to hide the seam, because, again, looking at the asset, it's kind of hard to predict which way you'll be viewing it from anyway. So there's no real good hidden spot. Oh, and that reminds me, I need to also make sure that this is embedded nicely into the floor of the balcony. I wasn't very careful. I guess I was in a hurry, so I missed. There we go. That's good. Okay, now again, there's no clear, obvious choice for hiding the seam, so I'll just pick a random edge loop, and I'll just use that and cut. Now I've got a seam going around, and I've got a bunch of shells. And if I start moving these shells apart, you can see what my shell choices are. And now there's a seam going right down the length of it, so all of these shells should unfold nicely now. Unless I miss something. So let's just go through and double check. Let's find out. So ready, set, go. Grab a shell in UV mode, and we will unfold options. Ready, apply. Okay, now this is a good example of Maya being stupid. Oh wait, no. Okay, not yet. Okay, I can't blame Maya yet, because looking at my shell again, I remember. Okay, wait, I actually do need to cut a few more seams to make this unfold properly. So if I go through now and grab these edges and cut. Now that I've cut those seams, it should actually unfold properly. So let's try that again. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So it's because unfolding these edges here on these faces, unfolding this way, I just need one seam so that it's not like stuck together like this. Like I need to cut one seam so that it can unfold. But these edges, because I've got these edges still attached, if you look at the shape here, because I still have these edges attached, these edges become a problem because these are trying to turn directions. Like it's trying to turn this way, it's trying to turn this way, and it's trying to turn this way, and it can't unfold properly unless you give it a seam on these edges. So so that's what's going on there. But now we're good. And again, if you double check your distortion, nice clean checkers. So distortion's good. We can move on to the next shell. So let's see what else we got. How about this one? Let's just hit apply and see what happens. Now this one should be fine. This is definitely an example of Maya screwing up, because this is literally a series of square faces, and they're all just connected around, and there is a seam. There is no other seam I should need. This is just Maya being terrible. Maya should not have a problem with this. So if I hit apply, this should work. And let's, again, just to be fair, to give Maya a chance, let's try switching to the Unfold 3D, which is Maya's new Unfold. Now that kind of worked. Let's see. Let's check the Whoa, no, not really. Distortions, ridiculous. But it looks better than it did in terms of certain distortion things, but definitely not a win. So let's undo that and go back to Legacy. Now, again, this should have just worked. This is Maya's bad. This is like the simplest possible shape to unfold. But let's let me just go ahead and Control 1. There we go. Isolate selected on that. Okay, cool. So yeah, this should have worked. This should have just unfolded. But we can force it to work. We can make Maya behave, and to do that, that's when we start playing with these unfold constraints, horizontal and vertical. And again, it's kind of weird. You kind of have to go in the right order. Now I can tell just by looking at this shape that I'm going to need to go horizontal first and then vertical. But let me show you what happens if you go backwards. If you go the wrong way, vertical and then horizontal, and that's absolutely terrible. So I'll undo both of those. Now if I go horizontal and then vertical, perfect. Like this is exactly what I need. So it's kind of wonky. Again, you shouldn't have to do that, but sometimes Maya just freaks out. It can't figure out the math, and it just doesn't work. So this is how to make it work. Using these unfold constraints, because there was no other seams I needed. There's almost no other seams I could have used, really. This is like the simplest possible solution for a simple shape. But now it's good. Now it's done. So we can move on. And let's grab the next shell. Let's see what the next shell requires. So this shell is, okay, that one. So this is going to be the again the inverse of this, right? It's basically the same. So I know for that one I needed to go and cut seams along here, because these need to be able to spread apart in order to unfold properly. So shift right click, cut, grab the shell, bam. Oh, whoops, I forgot to switch it back to none. And there we go. So again, usually my general process is I'll start with unfold constraints none, and if it works, cool. If it doesn't work, then I know I either need to cut more seams, or I'm going to try using horizontal or vertical constraints. And sometimes I can just look at it and go, oh crap, oh, I need more seams, my bad. Other times I look at it and I'm like, dude, this should work. There's no other seams I need. That's when I switch to trying the unfold constraints. Let's see, what's next? This one. Now this one again is, this one I know I'm going to need some seams. That's this shell right here. Turn off the checkers for a minute. X-ray mode. So that's this shell right here. And I know, looking at this model, I know I'm going to need seams. I've got one seam down the whole length of it, which I know I need that because otherwise it's stuck, right? But again, you can probably get the idea by now. It's these edges rather that I need to cut, because these need to spread apart. And if I don't cut those to let them spread apart, it's just not going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and shift right click, cut, go to UV mode, grab the shell, bam. And then this is exactly the shell I would expect. I almost don't even need to check the checkers, but again, you should always. It's easy to get lazy and stop checking things because you just look at the shell and go, oh, yep, that's what it should look like, and then you just kind of move on. But it's always good to double check your work, just to make sure that it's nice, clean checkers all the way around. And every now and then you find something you don't expect. You're like, oh man, I thought it was going to be good, but yeah. Okay. So moving on. That shell's good. I know this is not the most exciting thing in the world. If you're watching me live, this is not super entertaining, but it's just one of those things that is very critical. It's necessary if you want to be able to texture your models. So it's a necessary evil, and so some people need to learn it. Okay, so next shell, again, same kind of deal. This is kind of repetitive because the shape is very repetitive, but just need to cut these, cut all those, grab the shell, unfold. Good to go. And I'll just do the next one. This one, again, should unfold easily, but it fails. It's like it fails on the easiest ones, which I don't understand. But okay, horizontal, apply, vertical, apply. Okay, switch back to none. Okay, we're good. So there we go. Grab, oops, undo. Grab this one. Cut. UV mode, grab the shell, apply. We are good now. We have all of this unfolded properly. Distortion should be good all the way across. Checker pattern looks nice. Got some scale differences, but again, we still haven't done the layout anyways, so as soon as I do the layout, it'll fix all that. So let's do that. Grab the shells. In UV mode, shift right click, layout, oops, layout, options. Make sure prescale set to world, and then bam, apply. And there it is. All the checkers are all identical in size, as they should be. And it, does a layout for me. Again, I'll probably, I don't really want this one post, even though I did instance these. So I've saved myself a lot of texture resolution by instancing all of these. So they all share UV space. They're all going to share a texture. But I still don't really want this little post, this physically little post, to occupy a whole texture sheet, or even most of one. I mean, because that's kind of a small object, so it shouldn't really require a lot of texture resolution to get that asset painted. So I definitely am going to want to grab a bunch of these shells, and I'm going to want to put them in with some other objects, combine them onto a different texture sheet. That's going to make this a much better, more efficient layout. So otherwise it'd just be wasteful to have like a super high res, post. I guess the other option, and I've heard different people have different opinions about this, or not even just opinions, but it also could depend on the game engine. Some game engines prefer certain things than others. For what I'm getting at is, you could just make one texture for this post that's just a really low res texture. Like, you could use like a 256 or something. And if you use a 256, then it's like you're not wasting a ton of resolution on it. It's not like it's a huge file that you're loading into memory. However, there's always arguments back and forth between different game engines and people, whatever. Which is better? Is it better to have like, okay, let's just put a small texture on this small asset, and then but it has its own texture, or is it better to put a whole bunch of small assets onto one texture sheet that's a higher resolution? So again, there's different reasons to do different methods, and it depends on kind of where you work and what their pipeline is and what they want from you. or what the game engine wants. Some game engines do better with a bunch of small textures versus other game engines that want like a few large high res textures that share UVs with multiple assets. So different possibilities there. You just have to decide or figure out which one works best for you or for your engine or for the studio you work for. Okay, let's see. What next? Let's finish the balcony. Let's get the balcony ready to go. So, okay, this asset here. What should we do with it? Let's see. Different choices we could make. And you'll notice, let me go ahead and isolate it. You will notice that I have deleted the back face there, the interior face, because again, that's gonna, no matter what, that's gonna be butted up against a wall. So it's definitely doable to get rid of that. I didn't delete the back face here or here though. Turn off my checkers. I didn't delete this or this because you'll see that it's kind of protruding out beyond the edge of the house there. So now, of course, you could actually take it further too, because some balconies do kind of wrap around. I could have done that, so I could have extruded these out and had it wrap around, but mostly I just kind of wanted it to protrude out a little bit. To actually, that was what the reference did. The reference I was looking at, it did that. So, anyways, let's start with just the bottom part first, and I think it feels good. It feels right to me to basically take the top set of faces. I feel like taking the top set of faces and projecting and creating a shell out of that seems right, and then the bottom would be its own, and then I'll have the sides be their own. I feel like that it's gonna change. It feels like a natural place for a scene for me. So let me go ahead and planar map Y on this one. That gives me that shell, and then I'll do the same for the bottom. I'm just Control-Shift clicking to select, and then double checking my selection, and then again Shift-right click, mapping planar Y. Now we've got a top and a bottom. Now we just need the rest of the middle part, and that's just going to be, I'll just marquee select right through the middle, and then in this case most of the faces are facing the Z. So mapping Z. And then now here, I haven't unfolded any of these. I've just started creating shells, which is fine. You know what? This is annoying me looking at this, so I'm gonna planar map on the Y for this one and just kind of get it. There we go. Just so I couldn't I couldn't look at that anymore. Like just having that like jumble of weird messed up UVs in the middle is killing me. Okay, anyways, we're good now. And again, let me just go back and isolate this again. So now we just got to do some unfolding, and this one, the bar, like the railing, is gonna need some cuts, but these two don't. The top and the bottom don't need cuts at all, actually, because they're perfectly planar. There's no changes in surface direction. Perfectly planar, so I can literally just jump right to unfolding, and then legacy, cool, apply. Should be good right off the bat. Yep, nice clean checkers. Then I'll grab my other shell and hit apply, and we're good there. Nice clean checkers. So okay, so now we just have to deal with the sides here, and then I might. I think okay. Let's just keep moving. All right, so. Let's just grab the sides and let's just give it a shot. Try unfolding. That should be fine. Let's see. Let's check the checkers. Yeah, it looks clean. Again, because this has a lot of changes in direction, right? So there's changes in direction here where it kind of bends, and there's pretty sharp change right here. The difference is. The reason that this unfolded just fine with no seams is because I didn't try to keep it connected to this. If I had left the top connected, it would cause all kinds of problems. But this is changing direction only in one axis. It's only changing along this axis. And so it's fine. It unfolds just fine without any extra work or seams. So we're good. So cool. So that's all good. Now, again, this is going to be the trickier part. And here's where I'm going to have to make some decisions. Like, okay, what do I want to do with this? Because this is starting to change in a lot of directions, and then it's also got a bend here. Like the bendy stuff kind of gets kind of funky. So, all right, what do I want to do? I also want to try to avoid any weird, long, awkward, weird shells. So, well, actually, okay. I don't know. And I also don't really know for sure what I want to texture this as. I mean, it kind of feels like wood makes sense, like a wooden balcony, I guess. But is it solid wood or is it, you know, I don't know. Actually, I should look up that reference again. I don't remember what it was. But let's just assume it's wood of some sort. It could just be carved. Let's just try. Let's just try some things. So we could try just ripping this off as its own shell. It's either that or we cut it into smaller chunks. Smaller chunks, again, might be easier to place and they'll be less awkward, but let's do that. Let's try that. Let's try cutting this off. Like here. Let's cut. See now, okay, now I'm seeing a different way. If I model this a little bit differently. If I model this a little bit differently, it's gonna make the texture seams kind of make more sense. So maybe I'll remodel it. I don't know. We'll see. Like basically what I'm saying is if I had a cut from here to here, it kind of makes more sense to me if this was a chunk of wood. Like if this was a chunk of wood, it makes more sense that it would kind of have like a slanted cut, and then it would kind of be put together there. So I may do that just to kind of clean this up. It would actually cut down on my poly count too. So let's just do that. Let's cut it like that, and then if I cut it like that, I can delete that whole edge loop, and I can delete that edge loop. So that's a little bit more optimized, and it kind of feels like it's going to make more sense to me texture-wise if this is a piece of wood, and then this is another piece of wood, and then here I don't know, maybe it's a piece of wood that maybe the bend is a separate piece. It could be, it doesn't have to be, but it will definitely make texturing a little easier, I think. So I'm gonna go ahead and do repeat that over here. Cut from there to there. And I will cut from here to here. And then, oh, but this is going to get tricky over here, though. Because over here, I'd leave a triangle there. That would be okay. Because again, this part butts right up against the curve. Over here, it doesn't butt up against the curve. It's got its own little thing going, so... still, I could leave a triangle there. It should be fine. And it would kind of make more sense visually. Alright, so let me go ahead and delete that edge loop. But what I'm going to have to do is leave a triangle here, which is not the end of the world. Again, triangles are not terrible for this kind of thing. Makes it harder to model sometimes because now edge loops would die right here, which could get complicated if I wanted to continue modeling on this, but no big deal. And again, this is a little bit more optimized, so. Okay, cool. So now, with this selection set up, what I could do is I can just grab that edge loop, and I can cut, which gives me a separate shell here. So I've got this separate shell now. And again, I'll need a seam. And in this case, there is probably a better choice for seam. I think the seam choice is probably smarter here. Because, again, that's the least visible spot. You know, because right here, it's a little bit more visible from if you're standing below the house, and then anywhere else, this is the least visible spot. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that seam. And grab the shell, unfold. Okay, so this is good to go. And it should have nice clean checkers, no distortion. So that's fine as its own shell. And then again, I can do the same on this side. So I'm just assuming that this is a piece of wood that I'm cutting off, so I could texture it sort of independently. So I'll cut that seam again. And if I cut that seam, it gives me this shell. And then again, I can choose this edge to put a seam on, cut, grab the shell, unfold. Oops. Uh-oh. Oh, this one has the back side. Okay, so I tried to unfold and it imploded. So, oh crap, what does that mean? Well, it means that I forgot that there was a face on the back end here. So, I just have to figure out what I want to do with that. Okay, so what do I want to do with it? Let's stitch it onto this side here. So what I'm going to do to make that work, all I'm going to do is grab 3 of the edges and cut them. What that means is that this face now is going to be like a little flap that's going to kind of go out like this, connected to that edge. So that's what's going to happen. And if I grab the shell and unfold, sure enough, there it is. I've got this face here now is like a little, kind of like a little flap sticking out of the rest of the shell here. That just kind of keeps it, at least it's now connected to the shell. It's not just chilling by itself, and yet it unfolds nicely because I've given it enough edges, enough seams to allow it to unfold. Cool. So all we got left is this sucker here, which is kind of the most awkward piece. Again, whenever you got like bendy pieces, the bendy stuff tends to get kind of funky. So let's decide what to do with it. It's gonna be could be a little trial and error. Let's see. Let's grab this way. We know we're gonna need a seam at least somewhere. And we might need the seam all the way around. So let me deselect again. So I double clicked, grab the edge loop, and then I'm going to deselect everything else. You know what I'm going to do? Let me just make my life a little easier. Let me move the shell kind of off out of the way. Let me try that again. Double click, and then deselect there, which leaves me only these edges here. So shift right click, cut, and go to UVs. Let's just try to unfold and let's just see. Sometimes I'll just do the unfold and see where the problems start to pop up. Because you can just look at it and like, oh, okay, well, it's getting a little funky over here. Which is no surprise, because I believe that's going to be where that's where the curvature is happening, right? Because the straight edges, it's usually fine with. But things get a little weird when it starts to make bends. And sure enough, it's starting to get a little funky there. So what's our solution? There's a few possible solutions, and let's just see. I'll just kind of play around and see which one I like. So one of the possible solutions is I could do this. I could start cutting seams along here, and then I'll leave this connected, but I'll cut the seams down here as well. Okay, and cut. And let's see what happens if I try to unfold that. It's starting to work. I can see some of the things going on there. You know what? I'm gonna make my life easier though. I'm going to just cut off this whole piece because the troublesome part is the bendy part. I'm just gonna cut off that whole part into its own shell. Because this is the part I really need to work with. This part here I can go ahead and unfold, and it should unfold just fine because it's kind of just a straightforward, pretty, easy piece. So sure enough, yeah, that's fine now. So this part is fine. I can get it out of the way. I can focus in on the kind of troublesome part here, which is the curvy part. So again, the curvy parts always get a little funky. So, okay, so let's just try this, and it may or may not give me awesome results, and there may be some overlaps actually, and I'll have to kind of come up with a solution for that. But better to make some, sometimes when you get stuck on this stuff, it's better to just try something and see what happens, and then if it doesn't work, then back up and try something else. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut those. Go ahead and go back to UV mode, do an unfold. So this is trying to do the right thing. I can tell. I mean, it's kind of spreading apart where it thinks it needs to spread apart. Distortion's kind of getting there. It's just it's getting awkward, especially over here. So it's definitely not a super great result, but it's on its way. So let's try undoing that. Let's see if we can kind of force it to work better. Let's try horizontal. And then, no, that's not going to work. Okay, so that's bad. So let's go the other way. Let's try vertical. And then horizontal. And that's better, but it's still not great. So there's still some funkiness. And there's definitely some overlap. Over here, it's not so much an overlap issue as it is over here. So let's just try cutting them into chunks. If I just cut off each individual piece, sometimes that if you just break it down into smaller pieces, I might be able to reattach some pieces so that I can eliminate some seams. But for now, my priority really for now is just making sure there's no distortion. So let's just try to unfold that. That unfolds fine, and in fact, I can kind of tell that distortion-wise, and if it gets a little hard to see distortion because the checkers are too big or too small, just scale the shell for a minute and just scale it up, and then it's like, okay, it's a lot easier to see the distortion when the checkers are kind of the right side. That's actually good. So that's good distortion-wise, which I'd be shocked if it wasn't, because I made it as easy as possible for Maya by chopping off that whole piece as a shell. So let's see how we're doing. Let's try to unfold that. Yeah. So chopping it all up into pieces is giving me much better results, but it's not really ideal to really have all these pieces shown on their own. So let's see if there's any way we can sort of sew any of these back on. Now, I could do that. Okay, so first of all, now that everything's chopped and unfolded, let me start by matching the scale. Because if I match the scale, I'll run into less unfolding problems later. So let me just match the scale first by layout, options, rescale world, apply. Alright, so now we're good. Everything should have the same size checkers. In theory, I think we're good. I guess we'll find out if we start stitching stuff together and there's a problem, but at least it should be close. So what I was gonna say is I could move and sew that one. So I was trying to keep. Ideally, I was wanting to keep this corner attached to this bendy part. I don't have to. It would have been nice for texturing purposes, because I was thinking of this kind of long piece as its own piece physically. But it just seems to work out better that stitching this onto that is going to cause less problems than stitching it on here, where if I stitch it here, it's going to cause some overlapping issues. So so this is just easier, and at least now it's stitched onto a larger shell, and it's not just a tiny little shell floating on its own, which gets a little obnoxious. So what else can we do? Maybe so some of these I'm mousing over these and I'm like, wait, could I stitch it there? Nah, I don't know. I could maybe get away with that. That kind of works. And again, if I'm gonna do that, I should unfold again. So let me just try unfolding it again. Double check that I didn't create more distortion that way. Let me undo that though, because That I did layout. Whoops. All right, my bad. Unfold. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I want to try to unfold again to make sure that my moving and sewing didn't introduce any distortion. So let's just see if I can stitch some of these together. Because if I can stitch some of these together, it's just going to be a little bit easier to kind of keep it all together and know what each piece is, and it's kind of a little bit better for layout. So now this one's kind of wonky. Maybe it'll be alright. Yeah, let's see. Let me try it. Nice, moving the shell out of the way a little bit and try to re-unfold one more time. Okay, this is. I guess this is doable. And let's double check our checkers. Of course, always want to check that. So let me scale the shell up. Even though scaling the shell up, I'm going to want to undo that. As soon as I check it, I'm going to undo that. I just want to make sure distortion looks clean, and it does. So now I'm going to undo that scale, because if I, when I scaled it, of course, that I ruined the texel space. The texel space was off, which means the checkers weren't matching. So, but this is good now. This is probably an acceptable solution. I don't like the awkwardness of the shell, but at the bottom line is your priority really is getting rid of distortion. And if this is the shape that Maya needs to create to get rid of distortion, then you got to do what you got to do. There are kind of ways to sort of tweak things a bit and clean them up, but sometimes they work better than others. And again, Maya's not the best for this. Okay, but there we go. So this is this asset's now good to go. We could lay this out and texture it. So we're starting to build up our asset library of UV mapped models that are texturable. Again, we haven't decided to lay everything out yet. I would just probably go through and unfold everything first, before I actually bother to lay it out. Because again, I might want to lay out these posts along with this, and maybe also along with the table. I don't know. Depends on which pieces go with what. But I'm gonna want to try to combine these texture sheets so that I'm not wasting a bunch of pixels on the sheet. So you want to cram as much onto those as you can for efficiency purposes. Okay. Let's get into this one. I'm just gonna keep rolling with this. So let's dive in. Okay, so once again, turn off my checkers. Once again, generally the walls kind of make sense to me to go together. And the roof is where things get tricky, right? Where things kind of change surface direction. So to UV map these, again, I think let's do Z. So mapping linear Z. And pick a spot to cut. Now, again, in this case, it depends. If this is a top-down game, then the back edge could be the seam, because you're never going to see it. But in this case, we don't know. We don't know if it's going to be a top-down game or a first-person shooter. So you might be standing, and able to run all the way around the house and see every side. So what choice do you do for the seam? In this case, I would say actually the smart choice would be one of these. Which one doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot. Maybe the back one's better, I guess. It depends on if you're seeing the front of the houses more often. But the shorter edges make sense to put the seams on. It's a shorter edge. It's a shorter seam. It's a less visible seam if it's smaller. So I'll go ahead and cut there. Go to UV mode and go ahead and unfold. Bam. And that shell should be good to go. Double check checkers. And that looks good. So that's nice. Again, these are the easy parts. And sometimes it pays. Sometimes it's easier to just start by ripping out the easier shells first. Knock out the easier shells and then save those troublesome areas for last. It's good psychologically. It makes you feel better about it. You're like, oh look, that's already done. Cool. And then you only have a little bit left to do. But yeah. Okay, so now the roof again is going to be tricky because it bends quite a bit. There's a lot of curvy, bendy stuff. Well, not so much curvy, but definitely bends. Okay, let's dive in. So basically, again, I want the whole roof, and the whole roof is right here because that's all that's left after doing this shell. Then all that's left is the roof, which is left in the 0 to 1 space. So anything you haven't messed with yet is going to be left in the 0 to 1 space. So you just grab the whole thing because that's what I want. And I will shift right click, mapping, planar Y. And again, I've got, it's basically very similar to the house I did earlier. It's just got an extra little bend in it. But other than that, it's pretty identical. And I'm probably going to do the same thing basically. Unless I do it and it causes a problem. So let's find out. So I'm just going to go click, Control Shift double click, Control Shift click, Control Shift double click, and now I've got all those edges going around. And I will Shift right click, cut, go to UV mode, grab the shell, and unfold. Now this one is going to be a little bit more interesting. In the sense that we can talk about what's happening here. So make this a little bigger. So what's happening here? Right here, these edges definitely needed to be cut. It needed to unfold there. Same thing with these, obviously, those definitely need to unfold. These get a little funky. So where are these edges? These edges are right here going this way. And what this means, it means two things. First of all, these are overlapping right now, which in the case of, I always say, is overlapping UVs good or bad? The answer is it depends. In this case, it's bad because it's not planned. We don't want these UVs to overlap. And of course, we can tell that they're overlapping because of the shaded UVs. And this is a problem because it's going to cause some funkiness when you paint. When you paint right there, you're going to get some issues with your paint job. So we don't want those UVs to overlap. So what do we do? Well, there's also another thing that's happening is the fact that these UVs, they're not really spreading out very far. They're not really spreading out very far because this angle, this angle right here isn't very sharp. It's not like a 90 degree like these. Like this is like a 90 degree. From this face to this face, and then this face to this face. So this is a much more extreme angle, which means the seam was much more critical. This is a much more shallow angle, and that means that this seam, in theory, we might be able to just sew the seam back together. And if we sew that seam back together and re-unfold, it might be fine. Like, we might be able to just get away with that. So let's try that first. Let's go ahead and grab those edges, and then Shift right click, move and sew. And then, again, when I move and sew, it's going to introduce distortion. But that means we're going to want to grab the shell and do another unfold. And check it out. When I did the unfold, it barely moved. It barely budged. So what that means is that seam wasn't really crucial. So I got away with sewing it back together. If I couldn't sew it back together, if sewing it back together caused too much distortion, I would have had to come up with a different solution. Like, I'm seeing a little bit of distortion now, but I don't know if it's enough to cause an issue. So otherwise, I would have to come up with a different solution that would involve cutting off a shell and moving it somewhere else, and making strategic decisions about seam and shell choices. But this is definitely acceptable. And now this whole thing is all good to go. And again, just for the hell of it, let's just lay it out just to get it kind of sorted in the sense of keeping the scale right. All right, so there we go. Now the shells are all identical in resolution, and it's good to go. And I could texture this if I wanted to, but again, I don't want to waste UV space. And also, again, I could overlap UVs if I want to be if I want to take better advantage of my resolution, my texture memory, I could cut this like the walls, for instance. I could cut the walls so that they are overlapping, and that would be more efficient. But then again, that means that you have identical textures all the way around the walls, which gets a bit, repetitive, and it's not as nice to look at. So, okay, so moving on. Control 1, bring everything back. I'm just gonna keep driving through this. Okay, so Control 1 on this one, and let's tackle this one. All right, so I've got the walls again, which again just kind of makes sense. In this case, it's the x-axis that is facing the majority of the stuff. So mapping planar x, turn off my checkers again. So mapping planar x, drag this shell off to the side. And actually, might be able to get to... Yeah, we might be able to unfold it just like it is. Let's see. Nope. Okay. I forgot to cut somewhere. No, there's seams there. Let's. Oh, I was using. I forgot to change it to layout. Okay, so unfold. Full options. There we go. Now let's try it. Yep. And I think it's gonna be fine. Yeah, it rotated it kind of funny, but that doesn't matter. That's really easy to fix. In fact, I think I could just. Clockwise? No, okay. Let's just use the E key. So just use the E key and rotate it. Now, it doesn't even matter, really, to be honest. If this is rotated funny, sometimes you have to rotate the shells in order to fit them nicely in the 0 to 1 space. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. But, if I can keep it rotated right side up, then why not? At least it's easier to look at and kind of paint. Okay, so that shell's good to go. And we're back to just worrying about the roof. So again, I can just grab the shell, I grab the entire thing just by going to face mode, and then marquee selecting whatever's left in the 0 to 1 space, because that's all that's left to work with. And shift right click, mapping, planar Y. It gives me this shell. It's the same shell, really. It was already connected anyways, but now it's just kind of given my a head start to not screw up when I try to unfold. Okay, so now I need to cut some seams, because once again, this is not going to unfold properly without some seams. And let me just show you what would happen if I grab the shell and try to unfold right now. It kind of looks like it's trying to work, but it's definitely pinching kind of funkily here. And it's going to have some distortion. So it's on the right track. It's trying to get it right. But and again, you can tell where the problems are. It has more distortion where the problems are, and it looks really funky here. Like there's some overlapping, and it's because it's trying to overlap, and it's trying to unfold and it can't. It's stuck. I could undo this, but let's cut it now. Let's cut it. Like here's the problem, right here. Let's try to cut it now, and just cut. Actually, I don't need to cut there. That should be fine, because that's actually planar. It's actually flat and planar, so I don't really need the thing there. Let's just cut it the way the normal way. But I'll leave this unfolded, or kind of unfolded like it is. So Control Shift click, Control Shift click, Control Shift double click, and cut. And now watch what happens if we unfold. Watch what happens to the shell. It's kind of almost there, but ready? Bam. And it's kind of like, I did that on purpose because it's kind of visual. Watching it spread out like that, that's really what this is trying to do. It's trying to spread out, but if you don't make enough cuts, it's stuck on those corners. Like it's as if it was a cardboard box and there was tape on the corner. If there's tape on the corner, it can't open. So that pretty much does it for this little piece. I'll just go ahead and lay it out again, just for the hell of it, just to get the textile space kind of together. And move that to Control 1. So again, there's not a lot of new things happening. It's just a lot of it's the same thing over and over. You just go back through and follow the steps, repeat those steps, and sometimes you run into troublesome areas that like this is going to be pretty easy. Some things are going to be more troublesome than others. Usually, generally, if there's a curvy shape, uh, like for instance this door frame. Yeah, let's just do that. Oh, and this door handle, definitely. This door handle is definitely a challenge. Let's start with the door frame, and then we'll go to the door handle. Or, let's do the door. Let's do the door first. Okay, so... Control 1. Now the door, I did leave the interior face on, the back side, because you might want to pose it. You might want to open the door where the door is showing the interior of it. So you don't want to ever delete the back side of the door, because then suddenly an animator comes up to you and says, "Hey, can we rig those so that we can open the doors and close the doors?" And then you're like, "Oh crap! I didn't make the back side of the door," and then you're in trouble, and you have to go back and remake the model. So you just gotta assume that you don't know what somebody's gonna want to do with this thing. All right. Alright, so yeah, ready to go. Oh, and of course, got construction-y, leaf blowery stuff going on outside. So sorry if you guys end up hearing that. I do have filters on the mic, so maybe you won't hear it. Alright, anyway. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let's cut this out. I'm just gonna grab everything. I'm just gonna grab the whole model, shift right click, mapping, planar Z. Alright, and then I will cut some seams. So I'm just gonna start by double clicking that edge. And I'll probably rip the bottom off as well, but I'll get to that. So I'm gonna go like this. I'm gonna cut it all the way down there. I will cut here as well. Let's just try cutting it like this. So cut. So what I've got now is a seam going all along the top here on the front, and then down the edge, and then the bottom I've cut all, again, kind of like what I did earlier to create a flap, right? I cut 3 of the edges and left one of them not cut, so that will be like a flap that sticks off right here. So that's good so far. Now this, again, I'll just cut this off for now, and then I'll decide what I want to do with it afterwards. So let me just cut that off. Cut. I think I know what I'm going to do, but I'll do that. Okay, so I'll cut it right here, and I'll cut right here. I think we're almost there. Almost there. Okay, let's try to unfold. Let's see what happens. Ready? Oops, that's layout. Unfold. Options. Apply. Okay, so I think that kind of gave me what I wanted, except for this one's getting funky, which is fine. I was going to cut that up and do more with it anyway, but now this is nicely unfolded, and so I kind of knew what I was going for, and that's why I just cut all the seams I needed right off the bat, to save myself the hassle of trial and error. I kind of knew what was going to work, and this should be just fine, checker pattern wise. Good to go. And so what we got is, I've just got, like, the front of the door, back of the door. I don't know which is which at the moment, but it doesn't matter. And I just left them connected at this at the side panel, and that works. And then of course the bottom of the door is just this little flap right here, and then the other side is this little flap right here. And this kind of works. And the front and the back of the door are all connected and kind of seamless, where like it'd be kind of awkward to have a seam right here between these two panels. I'd much rather have a seam along the side along one of these sides here, because that kind of makes more sense to me. Then what I could do is start cutting this up. And let me unfold this. It's not happy the way it is, so let's just do. Let's try this. Yeah, that's almost better, but okay. So let me just do this. Sometimes what I do, by the way, if this is getting really funky, like it's got this weird tapering going on, which shouldn't be happening. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just I'll grab the shell and I'll grab the faces of the shell. I'll just reproject. I'll reproject. And again, reprojecting is always a easy way to sort of start fresh with new fresh UVs that don't have any weirdness in them. So I just projected on the Y, which is of course the way it's facing, and I've got a new kind of thing. And look how much cleaner it is now. It's nice and square. Now there's no distortion. I mean, there is distortion obviously because I haven't unfolded it, but I've given this a much better starting point. And now if I unfold, it's a nice clean unfold with no weird sort of taper to it. So this is much better. Now I could leave it like this, and I think I will actually. My other option would be, first of all, let me just get everything laid out. So this is actually pretty clean, and I think I like it the way it is. But my other option, the other option for how to cut this series of shells would have been like this. I could have cut it here, I could have cut it here, and actually just do it all. I cut all those. What I could have done then instead is stitch these on like this. This is another acceptable alternative, where instead of having one long strip that is kind of the thing. Now I've got this kind of series of faces that are like little cardboard flaps that kind of flip out like that. So, so that's acceptable as well. But and sometimes I do it this way. To be honest, sometimes I do it this way. Sometimes I do it the other way. In this case, I kind of like it better this way because, first of all, this whole panel here is not likely to be visible very often unless the door is open and you happen to be at a high enough angle to look down at the door. So chances are this is not going to be terribly visible anyway. And I like that it's like a nice straight line like this is much easier to place in the 0 to 1. And then I have still room to put some other random things up in there if I wanted to. And in fact, of course, I could also do this. I could rotate these and try to fit them in here a little bit more nicely. And if I grab both shells, let's go to shell mode. I grab both shells and sort of scoot them over. That kind of feels a little bit better in terms of placement. It just seems a little bit, to. And in fact, I could cheat a little bit if I go to shell mode. Oh, oops. All right, my bad. So there we go. So I could cheat a little bit by shrinking this down a little, because again, this is not this top of the door frame here. It's not crucial. It's pretty rare that anyone's going to see it at all, and if they do see it, it's probably just because the door's open and the camera's kind of looking from above. But it's also not a very big thing either. So scaling this a little bit, it's going to change the textile space. It's going to change those checkers. The checkers aren't going to be matching identically. But I didn't scale it much. And it makes this UV layout much easier to place. So I'm okay with it. Cool. Give myself some padding. Good to go. All right. So, anyways, that was the door. The door was pretty straightforward, pretty easy. But then I can go, and I can dive into the door frame. The door frame is going to be a little funkier because the door frame, it's a long, thin shape that bends, and that just gets to be a pain. It's the bendy part, of course, that is the pain, right? And the backside is cut off, because the door frame definitely, you're never going to see the backside of that because it's literally embedded in the wall. It's just the nature of door frame. Actually, not necessarily true. But in this case, it's true because of the way we're making these assets. So, okay, so we got the door frame. Yeah, generally speaking, I probably I'm going to end up doing I think the same thing as I did earlier with the other asset. Is just I'm going to double click this edge loop. Oh, let's just project first. All right, so let's project. Shift right click. Mapping planar, and it is the Z. So planar Z. The shell kind of makes sense. We just have to chop it up a bit because it's not going to unfold nicely because of the again the change in surface direction. Like between these assets, you know, it changes direction here, it changes direction here. We need to cut some seams in order to unfold this. So I'll double click this edge loop. So I'm going to get this edge loop. I'm going to get this edge loop, and I'm going to cut off the bendy part because the bendy part's the troublesome area. So shift right click, cut, and now I've got this shell, got this shell, and I've got the bendy part. Again, the bendy part's going to be the hardest part, so let's just do that last. Now, in this case, now that I've cut this shell off, because I've deleted the back face here, I don't need any seams on this. I don't need any seams. I can just grab it and unfold it. Oops, unfold. I keep forgetting to do that. So unfold options. I keep assuming this is my unfold window, but I forgot. Okay. Okay. Now here, again, this should unfold just fine. There is no reason that this should not unfold nicely. But you saw what happened. If I hit unfold, and it literally imploded. I don't even know if you can see it on the stream, but like it literally imploded to a single dot, like an infinitely small dot. That shouldn't happen. This should unfold just fine. And no seams are needed. So what does that mean? It means, okay, this is Maya's bad. Maya's screwing up. Okay, so unfold constraint none, not working. Okay, let's try unfold 3D. Let's try their new one. That's slightly better. It didn't implode into nothing, but let's check the checkers. No, terrible. Distortion everywhere. So once again, Maya's new UV solution failed. And the old one failed. But if we go back to the old one, there's ways to force it to behave. Which in this case, I know because this needs to unfold horizontally, I can just kind of look at it and tell. I'll just go, okay, horizontally first, bam, and then vertical, and now we're good. Now that's a nice clean unfold. So again, sorry, Maya not ideal. But we can make it work. If you're stuck with Maya, you can make it work. You just have to sort of know how to make it work with these little tricks, unfold constraints and so forth. So my guess is that's probably going to happen on this other one too. So let's just do it. Again, if we go to UV mode, if we unfold. Oh, see, now here's the, oh, whoops. Oh, so let's try it. Here's the irony. This is the best part. We did, okay, these are like identical, right? There's like this side of it and this side of it. They're identical. Here's the irony. I used unfold constraints none over here, and it imploded to nothing. I used unfold constraints none here, worked just fine. So don't ask me. I don't know what's going on. It's just math. It should just work. It's a computer doing math, and yet the computer did the math over here terribly, and it did it just fine over here. So I don't know. But whatever. Okay, it worked. That is kind of funny though. I'm glad I did that because it kind of cracks me up. You just don't know what to expect sometimes, but you have to be able to. You have to see when. You have to be able to recognize when Maya's screwing up, and when it's your fault. Because sometimes it is your fault. Sometimes you go, oh crap, I needed a seam there, and that's fine. But just cut the seam, and then you're fine. Other times it is Maya's fault, and you can just be like, okay, hold on. This is you telling Maya to behave. Maya, stop it. No. Unfold it this way, and then this way. Okay, so let's get to the troublesome spot. Okay, well, this is a good way to show why when you can expect things to overlap versus not overlap. So if I want to play with this shell right now, let's say I cut seams. Say I cut seams all the way across here. And then I also cut seams along here. So if I cut all those seams and then I do an unfold, it's probably going to unfold okay, but yeah, so it unfolded okay, but here's where we run into some problems. And it's also, this is a good learning experience right here, because if you look at the shell, notice that these all unfolded outwards, like they broke away from each other, but then these down here, these, like, if I, where's the camera? There we go. If these unfolded this way to where they started overlapping each other, well, how do you know it's going to do that? How do you know which way it's going to unfold? Is it going to unfold away from itself, or is it going to unfold towards itself? It has everything to do with the direction of the curvature. So in this case, if you look at these faces are bending concave, right? These are bending concave, so they're going to fold. They're going to fold away from each other. These. Oh, sorry. Wait. Hold on. Okay. No. Sorry. If you look at these edges, or is it obtuse and the angle's different? So you can look at this, because this was bending this way, which, yeah, that's concave. Yeah. So the overall arc of this is concave. And what so is this? Apparently I need to think this through a little bit better. Anyways, but I knew the backside of this. Was going to spread out just fine. And I knew that the interior of this was going to overlap. And that's why I wanted to show you this. And these are the kind of instincts that you'll build up over time, where you start to look, you just look at a shape and you can just tell, okay, if I cut those seams, I know they're going to fold over each other, which again is bad. You don't want this. You don't want this to overlap itself, because then if you start painting the interior of this, you're going to get all kinds of errors and problems. So what I'm getting at is, this is acceptable because at least they're not overlapping. But this is going to be something we're going to have to find a different solution for. And this is where I might do this, where I might just cut this whole thing off and just sew here, sew here, sew here, and just kind of make this kind of its own little shell like this. Because this is, at least this is not going to have any problems with overlapping. It's going to be a much cleaner solution. And when I do that, I can also do this. I can re-unfold this just to double check if there's any distortion I can get rid of, and then also re-unfold this. And this is going to be a much better solution. Again, it's not ideal. Having long, thin strips of faces like this it's not really ideal. It is kind of easier to place on the 0 to 1, but it's not totally perfect. Oh, there's this other new trick too that I like. This is a new trick in 2018, I believe. I'd never seen it before, but it is this. So I think it's in Arrange and Layout. Let me see. I believe it's in Arrange and Layout. Yep. So it's Orient Shells. So it's like if you're trying to eyeball the orientation, you're like, oh, let me just rotate this to try to get it straightened out, and you want it nice and clean and straight. This is kind of cool. Orient Shells. Bam. So that's it's much cleaner, much straighter than me just eyeballing it. So that's kind of nice. So anyways, so there are some kind of cool new tools in here. A lot of them, honestly, I've never bothered to try. I've kind of dabbled with them. I've kind of looked through these a little bit, and I'm just, playing around. But honestly, there's a lot of stuff in there I've never even tried yet. So use them at your own risk. Play around, have some fun, but just get ready to hit undo. Get ready to hit undo if it does something weird, because I don't know what it's going to do. So anyways, this is good to go now. Again, this is a pretty awkward shell, and again, it's not my only choice. It's not my only way to do this. Because again, I could do the same thing I did there with, I could kind of sew these together and cut it here. There are different options, but um, which one is the right one for you? It just depends. This is a little bit awkward and hard to place into the 0 to 1, unless you have a bunch of curvy shapes already, because then you can put curvy shapes in there. But okay, so let's just do the layout. Bam. All right, good to go. Go back to the main scene and keep moving. Okay, so we got the door. Actually, let's just see what we got. So we got the door. We got the door frame. Got the balcony. Got that. Oh, I didn't actually do that part yet. But that's fine. We got the house. Got chimneys. Got this house. We're busting through it. You know, we're making progress. We're busting through all these. You know, eventually, you know, like I said, you do this enough times. You do this over and over and over. It is tedious. It's repetitive, but you do it enough times, you get faster at it. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. You know, you just rip it off and just move on. Because then you get to, oh yeah, we did that too. You know, you get fast enough at it, you can just move on and start texturing. But you know, it's just the unfortunate reality that has to be done. You got to do this stuff, otherwise otherwise you can't paint your models. And if you want to paint your models, you got to do the UVs. Okay, so what next? Let's kind of jumping around a bit. You know what? Just a couple things left on this one. Let's just do this. And again, these are all modular pieces, so you can take these pieces and mix and match them onto the houses, and you don't have to use the same pieces on the same houses. Just use whatever you want to use to put these together, to kind of use it as like a model building kit. Okay, good. Let's take this sucker. So this one, checkers. Let's see what I'm doing. All right. So what are we gonna do here? I don't know. I think I know. Okay, so again, this is kind of gonna get funky because there's a lot of changes in surface direction here. So definitely gonna have to make some choices. I may just take this. I think I'm gonna take this. This whole outer ring. I'm gonna take that whole outer ring as its own shell, just because I'm gonna make a long thin strip out of it. I think that's gonna be the easiest way to handle that part. And again, that's the side. Like, I mean, if you really look at where it is, it's not super visible. So having a seam there is not gonna be really critical, I think. That's good. Isolate selected. Okay, so yeah, I'll just go ahead and project on that. Just now, projecting a shell in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and project on the Y. Oops, go back over here. I'm gonna project on the Y. Again, in this case, projecting the shell, it's mostly just to create a shell. I did this mostly just to create a shell, to rip this off as its own piece, and that just kind of gets it off out of the way. But I'm still gonna need to cut a seam. And I'll go ahead and cut the seam on the top. So I'll cut a seam there. And now I should be able to unfold this. And it should unfold pretty nicely. Yeah, so that's fine. That's a nice, it's a long, thin strip. But it unfolded just fine. Nice clean checkers everywhere, so we're good on that. That's good to go. I'll just move that off to the side. And we'll go zoom back into the rest of it. But what to do with the rest of this? Let's see. I feel like I want to. It might make my life easier if I take these parts and sort of separate them out a bit. What I mean by that is, let me try this. Let me try grabbing all of that and then deselect these. Let me just see if I can make little chunks out of this, like little quadrants. I think if I do that, I feel like it might just be a little easier. So let me do that. So let me project, and again I'll project on the Z in this case. Rip that off as its own little quadrant, and then let me. And I'm just gonna do that. I'm gonna make my selections. Basically, make my shells first before I start trying to cut and unfold. All right. So let's again mapping planar Z. Rip that off as its own little quadrant. Do that again here. Deselect that. Okay. Z. All right. So we got like 4 little quadrants here. I think those will probably actually unfold relatively easily. This is the only troublesome spot, so I might need a seam there. But I feel like this is gonna make the rest of it easier. So yeah, let's just try unfolding some of these. So I'm pretty sure I'm gonna need a seam here, but if I don't, I can always move and sew it back together. So I'll cut the seams all the way along that in those spots. All right, cut seams, go to EV mode, grab the shell, unfold. I guess I didn't. It looks like I didn't really need a seam there because that's where the seam is. I didn't even really need the seam. Let's just double check the UVs. Sorry, the distortion. Yes. Yeah, distortion wise, it looks good. And it doesn't really seem to. Oh, there's a little bit of distortion there. So maybe that's not where we need the seam. Oh, I know why. Because I needed a seam here. That's what I needed. I needed the seam all the way around. I forgot that those were attached. Okay, so no big deal. Let me just cut the seams there as well. Because there is a bit of distortion there. So now if I cut, now let's try to unfold. And sure enough, yep, it needed that seam there. It needed that seam because it's spreading out quite a bit. And watch now, the distortion will be gone. Nice, clean checkers. All that distortion that was up in here, it's gone now. So that's fine. That's acceptable. So I'll just do that all the way around. Oh, and actually, it looks like I already did. I think I was in shell mode. If you unwrap when you're in shell mode, it tends to unwrap all of the shells, which I didn't intend to do. I just forgot that I was in shell mode, so whatever. In this case, it doesn't really bother me, except for... Yeah, it's fine. Okay, because this is all that's left, right? This is the last little bit. And it tried to unfold it, but that's not going to be good. So, because I knew I would need some seams here. So, and that's fine. Okay, so, and I may find a way to reconnect some of these shells. But for now, let's just make sure we get everything unfolded cleanly first before we try to get fancy. So that's probably fine going down there. Fine. What I do probably think I'll need is a seam here. Here, I'm gonna rip off these little kind of little edges going down the sides. You know, like the kind of window frame, sort of. I'll rip those off just for now. Okay, so that gives me missed. Okay, so I missed a couple seams. So here, cut. I think we're good now. Okay, shell. Nope. Still got a piece on there. Oh, I know why. Haha. Okay, these seams. There we go. Let's cut those off. There we go. Now that's its own thing. That's its own thing. This is its own thing. And this, I feel like, might unfold just like it is, but I might need some seams like along here. But let's find out. Let's just... Yeah, okay. That's about what I expected. And again, it's not a great unfold. It's not a great unfold, but it's kind of right. And there may be a little bit of distortion. In fact, there's very likely, yeah. Yeah, so there's some distortion there for sure, but it's in the ballpark, and I could just, I think I could just rip off these, or actually, you know what? I'll just cut here, and I'll bet you that'll do it. I'll cut those, and then re-unfold this. Yep, that's about what I expected. Yep. So now nice clean distortion. I had to cut the extra seam there because it was getting a little funky. Um, I don't know if I like this shell. It's kind of a pretty awkward shell. So I may choose to cut these off along here and then stitch them onto these. I think that's very likely what I'll do because I think that's going to be a better choice. Because having these like funky little little flanges like sticking off, it creates really awkward seams that are hard to place, and there's nothing you can really put in there to sort of to use that texture space now. It's kind of like wasted pixels. So I'll probably recut that. But for now, let me start by unfolding the rest of these things. So like these now, again, I'll probably need to cut them differently. But I definitely need to unfold these. And I could, you know what I could do too is, yeah, okay, so let's just start by unfolding. And it's not giving me the best results. This shouldn't be kind of weird like this. This shouldn't be like all meh. Like that's not good. Because that's not what's happening. That's not really happening there. So we don't want that. So again, if it's kind of behaving weird and I'm trying to unfold and it's not giving me good results, so I could try horizontal and then vertical. It's still not fixing it. If it's still not fixing it, like, dude, that shouldn't be like that. Then that's usually when I'll try to fix it by starting fresh with that shape, and I'll just reproject it. And in fact, I could probably just reproject all of them at once for now, and then do the unfolds. So I'll project again on the Z. Oh, yeah, sometimes this gets weird. Face mode, bam. There we go. All right, mapping Z. All right, so that should get me much closer in the ballpark where Maya won't screw this up now if I try to unfold it. So again, I'll try none. I'll give Maya a chance, and that seems fine. It's a little bit kind of weird right there. Let's try using the horizontal. No, okay. See, that's where it's getting weird. Is on the horizontal part, because there's no real taper in it. There's no taper there, so it shouldn't be tapering. Let's try vertical first, and then horizontal. Yeah, it's getting this funky taper there. I don't know why it wants to do that. And I'm sure there's distortion. Like, that's just not acceptable. It's not cool. All right, let's try horizontal and then vertical. Weird. It actually did a better job with none. That's kind of funny. Not a much better job, but it did a better job. We can actually kind of manually fix it if we just kind of grab those UVs, sort of grab these UVs on their own. In fact, let's grab this one too. Let's just grab all those lined up, and we'll just shift right click, align UVs, do menu, and let's do it again on this one. And we're just going to straighten these because these should be straight. So we'll do menu. Okay. And then this should do the same. We're just trying to make sure that these are all lined up. It'll be cleaner that way, and it shouldn't cause any distortion because if anything, it should get rid of distortion because those in reality those lines are straight. So anyway, I think that's better now. No, it's not really critical. You probably could have left it. It was like a pretty marginal, like pretty small difference. It was just my OCD kicked in and it was just driving me nuts. So no big deal. All right, but let's make sure to get all these unwrapped as well. So fold. this, unfold, this, unfold. Okay. Now again, now that these are all unfolded, I could go ahead and do the layout first, just to make sure we're on this. We're all everything's all in the same texel space. Everything's identical in scale. That'll get me, and that'll make it easier for if I want to move and sew some pieces. Then it'll move and sew nicely, and it won't cause distortion because it's matching in scale. So that should just make life a little easier. I can also do this. I can probably start to sew these pieces together. Bam. Now, oh yeah. Okay, so now this is a pretty easy piece to play with now, and that also changes what I was planning on doing with this, because I was gonna hook these up. Some of these little pieces here, I was gonna like right here, these little pieces, I was gonna stitch onto this, but now I still might do that, but I don't think so. Let's see where those pieces are. Yeah, maybe I will. I don't know. Let's see. But because this is still an awkward shape, so let me cut these pieces off. Let me cut all these pieces off, and then see if I can find a better place to put them, because I don't like how they stick out there and it's really awkward. So let's find out. Yeah, okay, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Okay, cool. Yeah, alright, oops. Cut that one off. Cut. Yeah, okay, move. And move. Okay, yeah. Oops, wait, one more. Yeah, okay. I like that. I can dig that a little bit more. So that kind of, keeps these pieces attached to something, and it makes this piece way easier to place. And in fact, it looks like I can probably just fit it right in there. So this is definitely a pretty good solution. This gets a little bit long. And by the way, this being so long is why I'm losing so much resolution for the rest of this. So sometimes I've run into this a few times where, a lot of times actually, but I've run into this where having this long, thin shell that travels all the way around the model makes a really long, awkward piece. And the only way to fit this into the 0 to 1 is to make it really long and shrink everything down, like scale-wise. So you have to scale everything down to make sure that this matches the resolution and it goes all the way around. Here's a fun trick. Watch this. If I just cut this, if I literally cut it in half, and now I have 2 shells, now I can scale everything up. I can scale everything up so that it has more resolution. It's just much easier to place now because this is way too awkward and way harder to place than this. So cutting it in half actually just saved me a lot of hassle trying to fit it all in. Now I could leave it long. I could leave it long like that, and then just try to place a lot more other stuff in here. Like I could just place a lot of other assets in here, and that might be fine. But if I'm texturing this asset on its own and I want to try to maximize my resolution, this is going to be easier. So now if I go back in and do the layout again, now it's a much higher res texture. And of course I can just go back in and do this because that's just nicer. And I still have room for some other stuff. I still can like put other things in here, but I'm not stuck with like a super high res image in order to texture that whole thing, because this was causing me problems. Okay, this one's good to go. What else we got? Oh yeah, the door handle. Door handle, gonna be tricky. Parts of it super easy. Other parts of it kind of a pain. So let's just dive in. Easy parts first. All right. So again, let me just Control 1 this. easy parts first. The cube part, right? And it's a cube that's missing its backside, so even easier. So again, I'll just shift right click, mapping planar Z. Drag that shell off to the side, and I know, again, change in surface direction, right? Change in surface direction 3 different ways. So what does that mean? It means I need to cut seams here, 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 and here. So once I cut those seams, now I should be able to unfold this. Click, unfold options, bam. And that's exactly what I would expect it to look like. It is like an unfolded cardboard box. So, and that makes sense, and that works. So, again, that was like 2 seconds, super easy. In fact, let's do it again over here. Same thing, right? Same exact thing. All right. So, same thing, project on the Z, create a shell. And then this is going to be easy to select. I just go to edge mode, select right down the middle, grab those seams, cut, and unfold. Done. That asset's done. Okay, now where things get trickier, a little bit trickier is this part. I'm saving, of course, the hardest for last, but this is a little bit trickier because, again, we have to make a decision on this one. First of all, we're just going to start by projecting on the Z because, it just makes sense, easier to do. Cool. Now, again, we have a decision to make. Do we want to make this so that there's a whole bunch of little flaps, flipping out around the sides, or do we want to make one long edge or one long set of faces going this way? I do it differently depending on the asset. Some assets, it makes more sense to me to have the little flaps flipping out. Other times it makes more sense to me to have a long thin strip for the border. So let's see what we got here. I think in this case, I prefer having the long strip here, because what's the front of this? The front of this is the keyhole. The keyhole is the critical part, right? That's where the texture has to look really nice. The texture has to look really nice in the keyhole, because if that doesn't read right, if that doesn't read well, then the whole thing's gonna fall apart, and it won't read well as a door, or a door handle rather. Okay, so the sides of this, however, not really crucial. They don't. It's not really critical that these look amazing. And then also the other thing is, mentally, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, also having a seam right here, having a seam right there all the way around, that doesn't bother me, because the reality of a physical lock in real life is very likely that this whole front part is a physically separate part from here. It's like, it's 2 separate components usually, is what I would think. And having a seam there is natural to me. Like, you can paint that seam and it would just make sense. Okay, so that's what my thought process. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and re-project some of this. I'll probably just grab the faces here and just project on the Y. And that creates this this other shell choice now, where now we've got this strip going this way, and we've got the keyhole. And of course, I need a seam on it. I do need a seam on it, and of course, the bottom of this makes the most sense for the seam because it's the least visible spot. So let's go ahead and cut a seam there, and I will do an unfold. So fold options. All right, none. Okay, and then you get this kind of funky curvy thing. Now, why is this curving? Why is it curving? Because this tapers. If you look at this this shape, it's because this tapers that Maya decides that it needs to curve. It needs to curve the UVs to match that shape without distortion. So that's why it's curving. Now you can actually get away with sometimes. Some artists will choose to try to straighten this to make this a little bit easier to paint on. technically right now, this curvature is necessary to get rid of the distortion. However, you can kind of get rid of, you can get rid of the bend. You can get rid of the curvature a little bit. It'll introduce a little distortion, but sometimes some artists feel like a little bit of distortion is acceptable if it makes it like 100 times easier to paint in Photoshop. Let me show you how you would do that. Is you can go to UV mode, and you can grab, basically, let's say we'll grab one set of these UVs, the backside basically. So I'll grab just the backside, and I will shift right click, align UVs, and let's do max V. And that just aligns all of those UVs on the grid here. And then I'll just do the same to the bottom chunk. Grab the bottom, align UVs, and then we'll do min V. And that basically straightens out the whole thing. And then what you want to do is use the unfold constraints now and just do horizontal. And now it's going to have, let me just adjust the scale of the shell so you can see a little. And now it's going to have some distortion now, but it should be pretty acceptable. It's not going to really mess up the texture. But now painting this, like, again, if you're painting in Photoshop, you could just hold the shift key down and make a perfectly straight line in Photoshop. So now this is all, this shell is all lined up. So if you paint a straight, like I want to texture a stripe going down the side of it. It's all perfectly straight now. So you just paint a straight line in Photoshop, and now you have a perfectly straight stripe going around the side of it. Again, there will be a little bit of pixel distortion because we've introduced distortion by straightening those. But it should be like, again, it's a small asset. It's a small asset, and what you've done here is a small part of that small asset. So it should be fine. You probably wouldn't even notice. You'd have to look pretty closely to see that distortion. So again, you have, your number one priority is really getting rid of distortion, but a secondary priority sometimes could be to make it easier for the artist to paint on. And you might be that artist, so you might appreciate that, but you might not be. You might be modeling this and UV mapping it to give to somebody else, and the texture artist might be like, "Ah, thank God you straightened those UVs. It's so annoying to paint when you have to paint a curving line to sort of match the curvature," and they might appreciate that. Okay. Now the hardest part. This part is a pain, and to be honest, like, I've just discovered that it just seems to pay to cut this up into a million strips, and it's annoying. You shouldn't have to do that, but it's just, this is curvy in so many different ways. It's just the shape of this makes it really hard to unfold without introducing a lot of distortion. So first off, one of the things that I do is I'll take this whole chunk, space mode, this whole chunk here. Let me turn off the shade. So I'll take this like kind of knobby shape right at the end here, and I'll rip this off as its own shell right off the bat, because it's kind of a separate shape. It's just easier to make this, think of this as a separate piece. So I will project on the Z, drag this off to the side, and I'll kind of mess with that later. But sadly, what I'm gonna have to do probably is take the rest of this. Let me just get these kind of out of the way, these shells, so I can select the rest of it easier. Okay, so now the rest of it, I'll start by projecting. I'll just project on the X real quick. And that gives me this. Now, in theory, it'd be nice if you could just cut a seam and then unfold. But this, again, this changes surface direction so many ways. It's like changing this way. It's changing this way. And it's bending back and forth, and well, I'll show you what happens if you try to unfold it like it is. Like if you try to unfold it like it is right now, it's just going to implode because there's no seam at all. But if we choose a seam, and of course choosing choosing the back of it is what makes the most sense, and I'll deselect that because I don't need that. But if I cut a seam, oh whoops, and this cut the seam all the way, which I only want it to travel the back side. So I'm going to deselect the seam on the front. So we have only the seam on the back, which should be enough. And if I cut that seam and try to unfold, I'm going to go none. It's first of all going to implode. It's going to implode and just look really weird. So that was a fail. We could try the unfold 3D. That's better. That's closer to what I would want. But it's still got distortion everywhere, like especially on the really twisty parts. The twisty parts, again, those are the trouble areas, right? That's what's causing the problem. So you just can't get around it. You're gonna have to cut more seams. You're gonna have to rip off more shells. So I'm gonna do that, and I'll go ahead and undo this. So to do that, I'm just gonna start selecting edge loops. Selecting edge loops along here. Like, okay, this part's kind of straight, like right down here. That's kind of straight. So I'll go ahead and leave that as one shell, but I'll cut on either end of it, and that gives me this shell, which means that there's a curvy part and a curvy part. So the straight part, let's just see what we can do with that. Let's just go ahead and grab the shell in UV mode, and let's just go back to legacy, none, and apply. And that looks pretty good. That looks about like what I would expect it to look like. And sure enough, the distortion is pretty good to go. Again, this is a much less troublesome part because it's kind of a long, straight cylinder, which it unwraps fairly easily. Now, when we get to these other curvy parts here, it gets funky. So once again, in theory, because I've simplified this a little bit, in theory, I should just be able to, you know, sort of unfold this, but I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to end up having to cut this because it bends quite a bit. But let's try it. Let's just apply. Yep, and it just implodes. So not acceptable. Not we can't use that. So let's just cut it more. Let's just cut it into every single chunk. So every single segment basically of the curvature there is now its own piece. Now it should unfold fine because it's only changing direction in one axis for each time. Although it didn't though. So this one didn't. This one should be really easy. It should unfold just perfectly fine. It's just literally a cylinder. But it gives me that weird, funky kind of thing. Which tells me, okay, let's do vertical first. Perfect. That's exactly what I needed. And then I'll do horizontal too, just to be careful. And now that's fine. So again, this is Maya screwing up again. That was Maya's bad. That should have unfolded just fine. It just failed. Okay. Let's go to the next piece, and let's just try none. And that's kind of good. Let's try a vertical and then horizontal though. Just see if that gives me better results. Kind of similar results. It's still got some distortion though. So this is a problem. Oh, but you know what? I think this is a part of the problem with the model. I think we talked about this. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, so this is a possibility too, is in this case, the model itself has a problem. And what the problem is that this face itself, the face is actually twisted. So you want your faces to all be planar. Like if you have a four-sided face, it should be a flat four-sided face. And if you want curvature or twisting, the twisting should happen from face to face. The face itself should never be twisted, where if these are the 4 points of the face, they should never be twisted like this, where the face itself is kind of broken. That makes it causes this. It causes the distortion you're seeing here, where Maya unfolded this okay, but trying to unfold this, like these, actually both of these faces are have a little bit of a twist to them. That's not ideal. You don't really want that. So now again, the best thing to do is just to fix the model. Is because that will cause some weirdness no matter what. And one way you could fix it is you could just go into the scale tool and you could hit the D key, and you could orient. You can hit the D key to go into pivot mode, and then just click on the face to orient. It orients it based on the face normal. It orients the pivot basically. Then switch back to the scale tool, and then scale it, and that's going to flatten that face. And then you have to do that for each of those that you have an issue with, and that will basically make it planar. And then if you go back and try to unfold it again, Maya won't cause any distortion there. Shouldn't cause any distortion there. There we go. So now if I try to unfold this shell again, some of those faces should work better. Let's try none again even. Yeah, so there we go. Much cleaner distortion. So again, there are issues sometimes if you don't have a clean model. If there's a little bit of if there's a twisted face or anything like that, that can introduce distortion and confuse Maya, so that Maya is having a harder time unfolding. So keep an eye out for that as well. And this is one of those situations. One of the reasons I suspected that was the truth is that when you're trying to make these curvy, twisty things, you're modeling those things. Sometimes you're moving, you're rotating, you're twisting, you're doing all these things to try to make that curvature. It's pretty easy to accidentally get those twisted faces, and it's also easy not to notice them, because the whole model's twisting, and so you just don't see it. But try to keep an eye out for that. And if you keep getting distortion in a certain place, that's something else to look for, is to make sure that the model itself isn't twisting. And if it has to twist like that, another solution, instead of flattening the face, another solution you could do is you could just cut the face into two triangles. Cutting it into two triangles also would solve the problem, because basically all faces are two triangles, and basically Maya is rendering it as two triangles even though you don't have it cut that way. So actually physically cutting it into two triangles makes it easier for Maya to sort of figure out what you want from it. That's more of a, I would say that's the last choice you should make. Flattening the face should be your first choice, because that's cleaner modeling. It's cleaner. That's the way it should be. Cutting the triangle is kind of well, I can't flatten the face, because if I flatten the face, then I lose the shape that I'm trying to make. Okay, yeah, then maybe cut the triangle, if you're determined to have it shaped that way. That should fix the UV problem at least, and fix any kind of weird rendering issues that happen because of the twisted face. So, okay, so far so good. So I think we can unfold this one now. This one still needs to be chopped up, so let's just chop it up. Cut there, cut there, and push. All right, good. Apply. The shell over here. Hit apply. Should be good, and then apply. That one got weird. Now I can tell it got weird because that shape should look more like this shape, but it's really tapering down into nothingness, and I'm pretty sure that's wrong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to again force it to okay, that's not good. Let's do vertical first. There we go. I just kind of wanted to force it to behave. This is more like what it should look like, and I knew that, so I didn't even have to check the distortion to know that this was wrong. Almost done. Almost done. Just got to do this now. This one, easiest thing to do, I think, is going to be to cut that into a shell. Now this could probably almost unfold just like it is. Let's find out. If we try to unfold it, none. No, not quite. So okay, let's just cut some of these corners. Actually, just make sure I had the right selection. I feel like I missed. That's one thing why I turn the checkers off a lot of times when I'm making selections. Is hard to tell what you have selected. Let's try that again. Let's unfold now. That's much better. I could tell already. Now I could. I think this is within the realm of acceptable. I could cut these as well. If I really want to get rid of all the distortion, I would cut all of those. Because that's where some of that distortion is coming from. That would be the best possible distortion. It just depends on if, like, this is kind of these. Yeah, I think I'll probably just leave it like that. That's probably the least amount of distortion. Now you do have a lot of seams going around here that are kind of awkward seams that you lose some pixels, but it could be worse. So that's good. Now again, down here on the back side of this, that's this part here. I don't know. It might be fine just unfolding it like this. And again, this is kind of like a much less visible spot here too. So I'm more understanding of distortion here than I am on the front of that. The front of it's much more visible and needs to be kind of more perfect. So this is kind of, it's a little squishy. It's a little squishy. In fact, it might just help to cut it into 2 chunks. Let's do that. Let's cut there. Let's cut it into 2 chunks and see if it at least gets rid of a little bit more of that distortion. That's better. So let's just do that. Other side. Okay, so that's much better. I'll take that. And again, it's the back side of it, so it doesn't have to be perfect at all by any means. Okay, so this asset's good to go. This asset is good to go. Okay, and let me just lay it out, just because. Oops, there's all that stuff over there too. So layout, options, apply, bam. Cool. Good to go. This asset is ready to be textured. Again, we're not going to because we want to get everything put together on different texture sheets. And also remember that this is a door handle in a much larger scene. So again, you could texture this by itself, but you'd have to use a really small texture because it's a really small object. You don't want to waste a whole bunch of texture resolution on a tiny little object. But you could make a tiny little image file, tiny little texture for this little tiny asset. Or the option is, of course, to combine multiple assets. Like, okay, now let's combine the door handle with the door and the door frame. That kind of makes sense to put those together so that, that texture sheet sort of travels together as its own thing. Or whatever. Cool. Yeah. So far we've been live for 2.5 hours. And we've unwrapped a bunch of stuff. We've unwrapped. Let's just turn on the checkers and see. We got that. We got that. We got that. We got that. Got that. Got that. Got that. We got this too. We got this. We got this. Got this. Cool. So we've done a pretty good job. We made a pretty good dent in unfolding a bunch of these things. I think I'm going to take a break so I can get a nice workout,
go for a run, go to the gym, get my blood flowing, because it's good to stay alive and healthy. Um, and I'm starting to fade. Sitting in this chair for hours at a time definitely gets exhausting, and especially doing UVs. Doing UVs is definitely not the most exciting adrenaline pumping thing ever. It's definitely something you want to put music on, which is what I've been doing. You definitely want to put some music on and just get yourself in the zone and just try to it's kind of like working out actually. You don't it doesn't take a lot of brain power once you kind of know what you're doing. It doesn't take a lot of brain power to do, so you just kind of put some music on and just do it and just zone out. I like to have music and watch other people's Twitch streams. um, just kind of keep yourself entertained, and or put a movie on and watch a movie while you're doing it. Because again, once you understand how it works, it doesn't take a lot of brain power. You can just kind of do it, just kind of do it in your sleep eventually. And trust me, if you do it for 12 hours straight, you will be doing it in your sleep. You'll be having nightmares about UV mapping. So look forward to that. And yeah, so I'm gonna take a break and get some exercise and maybe some lunch and all that, and then I'll try to come back and stream some more later. But this hopefully should help you guys. Like, if you're struggling with trying to figure out UVs, I know they're not fun, they're not easy, and don't feel bad. Everybody sucks at them. Everybody struggles with these. They're not easy to learn. They're not fun to learn. So don't feel bad, but you just got to put the time in, and then it gets easier, and you can just get through them faster. So good luck, everyone. I'll see you all soon when I get back, and hopefully you're having a good day.